start by introducing yourselves, and what is it that got you? Maybe you start with 2012 and move from there to speak a bit more about what you've been doing with regards to your activism since then.
Yeah. Hello. My name is Mutombo. Real name is Percy Oseapia. Shouts to Bright Accra. I have no, issues with my government name. Yeah. I'm an artist. I started with spoken word poetry seriously in 2006. But in the last 5 years, I haven't been active because of so many things. Man got busy, family and all that, and also I was working with an artist, and that took most of my time. But right now, that chapter is over. Yeah, also, or along the way, I learned how to take pictures. I learned how to make videos. I've learned so many things when it comes to art, and I'm still learning. During lockdown, I learned how to make beats. Now, quite recently, I was sitting back and I told myself, wow, the plan is to be active again, like 2006, next year, next month, actually. I'm going to go hard again because now I have so much time for myself. I'm going to quit my job this month just so I can focus. I go like, wow, now I know how to do all of these things. And even though I have been taking photos, taking videos, and doing stuff, they are all behind the scenes. Now I'm going to be at the forefront again, and I can do basically everything. I can make my own beats, I can take my own videos, I can take my own pictures and all that. So I think the universe was speaking to me in a way. And also, this year has been a tough one, a challenging one, and I don't mind sharing because that is me. All the people who have been here haven't touched on personal stuff, but this year has taught me a whole lot of things, patience, tapping into. Right now, I was talking to Akusia Hansen about speaking to a friend at the beginning of this year who I nearly fell out with. That Charlie guy, we don't have to do this. There are so many people that I've wronged in the past, and now the reflective me or the deep me is tapping back, and getting in touch with, even though they are not many, getting in touch with all of those people to start afresh. So far, it has been so good. And yeah, I have a podcast that I just started on my birthday, August 11. It's called the If More, Let's Divide. And you guys should check that out. It's on Spotify and it's on Apple. Thank you.
He didn't get in touch with me to make amends. Hi everyone, my name is Golda Naa Addo. I'm many things, but core to them is I disrupt. Most of the time when I meet people for the first time, they tell me for such a disruptive pest, you're extremely quiet and soft-spoken. And that usually comes from the people who have suffered in my hands. I'm a very dangerous person. I mean, don't let this face fool. So the work I've always done has been in pursuing justice in whatever forms it has to come in. Sometimes people like to put me in a tidy little box and say, oh, you're the sweet person, you care so much about people. But I also have a very dark side to myself. If I want to disrupt someone and I have to use ways and means that are not criminal, but are a bit out of the box, I will do it. And It's come because I've realized that sometimes making a change is not always black and white. I started out from high school days, university, I did quite a lot of it, but I think what has stuck most in the public eye have been the one simple step that Girish mentioned, where I mentioned on Twitter that I was fucking tired of the bullshit that the Mahama government was putting us through. And I was going to just sit in front of the gate and see if somebody has the integrity or the sense or the presence to engage, because I am the person they serve. It's my votes, although I didn't vote for him. It's my votes that put them there. It's my taxes that pay them. They have to engage me, report to me. It's not the other way around. And I remember a few people echoed the same feeling on Twitter, and we picked a date and we marched the place. And I kept telling some of them that I've never been raised to feel like I need huge numbers to make a difference. All my life, I've been fortunate enough to be a person who does not waver if I'm standing alone and speaking alone. And I'm saying I've been fortunate because I know it's not how everybody is, and I never want people to feel like they're to blame for that. I took up joining Occupy Flagstaff House. I think I played a good role in there. I wasn't an organizer, and I wasn't there to take anything from government. So I always tell people, well, I'm not the Occupy Flagstaff House, even though I was part of it. So don't look at me and say, where's my government position? I took a big role early this year with the Nestle bad milk saga. People had been complaining for months, and Nestle was just feeding us bad milk and telling us it's not spoiled, so we should consume it that way. So I took 5 days out of my year in January and got them to actually stop that nonsense. I do quite a lot of these things very often. Most of the time you will not hear about it because I believe in putting my energy into the spaces that matter most. I am not someone who always talks about what I do. I'm a mother. I actively mother. I'm not the best mom, but I think that I have raised boys who can survive anywhere, and I usually like to pass that on almost everywhere. I'm a feminist, but not the usual loud, rude ones, although that's also okay. And above all, I'm a Ghanaian who believes I have a right to protect my country. I think I have a right to fiercely love my country, and I'm very used to constantly being the person that reminds everybody in government that they will eventually fail, and they will fail loudly and brutally. And if there's any way I can have a role to play in that, I always remind them that I will. Thank you.
So my first question for the both of you, I think that your spontaneous activism, to put it in a very short form, has been inspired by both of your love for your country. But I also know, speaking to you for over the few years, that there's been a lot of disappointment with all the different protests, movements, and groups you've been involved in or you try to support. There's been a lot of cynicism that things are not changing. Even though you help this group or you help that group, it either gets taken over by one of the two political parties or it gets spoiled by someone. So, in a way, can you speak to that? Like, you are still here, you are still continuing, despite the disappointment, despite the cynicism. Can you speak to that?
For me, I think I think I'm a coward when it comes to making a new life. You look at me like, and I'm saying this because that's the most basic reason why I think I'm motivated to keep up with this. I think of all the things I have to do to move countries, move myself, move my businesses, which I have several going on, move my projects, all the people that I'm central to their life, move my children. And I think about that, I'm like, fuck it, why do I have to do that? Why can't I put the same energy into making a difference here, right? Because I'm still going to go through a lot to make that life. So, okay, maybe then let me just put it here, because everything I love and hold dear is here, and I cannot uproot them out of no fault of mine. When somebody who does not deserve to be there, if we're working on merits, most of these people will be at the bottomest bottom of the pyramid. But they are now in charge, and let me rather put my energy into doing everything I can to get people aware that you can transform things. You can be a committed Ghanaian without necessarily having to sell out. You can help us to do better over time. It will take a while, but I think I'd rather stay here and do that. So I think that's why the biggest motivation for me, that's why I still keep doing this.
Yeah, so for me, I don't read much. Even though I read nowadays, I'm trying. So whatever I do comes from my brain. Personally, it's taken a whole lot to unlearn things and bring in new things. I'm still struggling bringing out things, and I know that some of those things can go on throughout my life. And I bring that into when I'm talking against something, when I'm trying to gather people so we do things. How we were raised, how we were trained has been etched in me. So for example, I grew up with my mom and my grandmother, may they rest in peace. And until they died, I had to go to church every Sunday, even though that wasn't me. After they died, I was still going to church for years until I started, drawing away bit by bit. Now I'm not religious at all. One simple step, for example, when I tapped in with Golda, I used my connections and my social media, platforms to gather people. It was something new. I was finally stepping out to go and, face or to go and actually do what I've been talking about for years. I still have those DMs, I'm sure. Over 200 people told me that they were going to come. No kidding. Over 200 people. And on that day at GBC, you remember we met at GBC, I'll never ever forget. At GBC, Golda came through, it was just us two, and another person came through. I'm like, oh wow, this is going to be big. Finally, yeah, I'm on to something. We were just 10. 10 people showed up. And I was disappointed because then over 200 people and we are just 10. But we still went through. I told myself that, Charlie, it's not their fault. It is not their fault because maybe unlike me, they are afraid to speak up. They still have in them when someone who's older, who's powerful, who's richer than you is doing something, you don't have to talk back. And in my household, it was a saying. Anytime we had people in the house, my mom or my grandmother would sack me. Anytime I'm talking back, they will shout at me. For all you know, they are going through the same thing, or they went through the same things growing up. I'm still here and I'm still pushing on, and if you follow me on Twitter, you realize how vocal I still am. I've been trying to organize things underground, but it always fails. Some years ago, we were doing something against, the telcos, MTN and all that. We weren't going to turn our phones on from morning to 12 noon. That didn't work. Oh, Mutombo, what's up? Oh, Charlie, so the thing, that didn't work.
Maybe you can speak a bit more about the different projects that I see you doing right now. So for Mutombo, if more, that's a Divide podcast. For Golda, you can speak more about your clinic. And what I find is that both of you are trying to fill in the gaps where things are not working, where a service is not being properly delivered. In one case, it's healthcare. In the other case, it's just knowledge about who is doing things and what they are doing and why it's important to do these things. Can you speak about your projects and what you are doing and why you are doing it now?
In the years that I found myself alone, and you would know that I was stigmatized quite often, not loudly, but getting jobs became difficult, getting into social circles became a problem, because it was a very deliberate effort to either bring me or get me to lean to the side of any of the ruling party. And in those years, I learned how critical it was to have mental strength and stability, but I also learned how important it was to identify people, sometimes even without them knowing, who could contribute to my mental stability, my peace of mind, my finding a safe grounding. And it made such a huge difference to me in a way I didn't expect. That I realized that it's what took me through those years. I leaned on a lot of hand skills to get through, right? To earn income, to make money, to survive, to the point where most of the people who were trying to economy just got tired of waiting. And in that process, it occurred to me that there are a lot of people who will not be fortunate enough to go through the same thing or know what I know now. And it put me in a space where I began to deliberately create that kind of support. So I would make myself available when people react on posts of mine and I realize they're seeking understanding. How did you do it? How do you still do it? I would intentionally make myself available to talk to them about the little ways you can get in tune with yourself. There's a lot of, a few days ago, someone said that you need courage to go through a lot of things, to pursue your dreams, to find yourself. You need courage because there will be so many doubts along the way that if you don't have courage, you will give up because you're afraid of what you will find in yourself. And I had to be the person to guide some of them through that. I saw firsthand how it transformed them to the point where I said, the only thing I can continue giving back that I don't have to sell, that I don't have to put an establishment up to be able to do, is to do this for as many people as possible, right? Over time, I think it became the one thing that may have drawn a lot of people to my space, social media, to me, myself, my inbox, my phone. And so what I began doing was just saying, the more Ghanaians we have who may be able to tap into this mental space, the better chances we have of having people who are confident enough in themselves to begin thinking, okay, we can do this. Maybe not immediately, but getting them into that point in itself for me felt like an achievement. Because previously, nobody's even going to even consider it. And that's what I began focusing on. I eventually got attacked a few times politically, and I felt very ill. And during that time, I needed so much money to get better. Money I did not have. My partner put word out, and in the space of 48 hours, we had raised 200,000 cedis, right? 70% of them till today, and every bit of it came through Momo at the bank. And this was this year, 11 year, right? I've looked several times at the names and the numbers of that. I took, the Momo transaction statements. I've stared at them so many times over. I don't know over 70% of these people. Some of them sent so much. And I thought if I've been this helpful to people that I don't immediately know, through the little effort I'm doing, how can I give back and do more? So I decided, okay, instead of just being this standing human being trying to attract good energy, let me just put up a physical space. And let that physical space be a manifestation of the things that can be possible. And let it be a starting point for the things that I feel we could add on to. I don't think I need to do all of it. I just need to show people that it's possible. And so I set up a place in Adenta that's called Body and Soul Rejuvenation Nest. And all we do is just create a haven. It doesn't matter that we are not popular or the hip thing. People find us, they come there, they get rested, they get someone to talk to. They have that space that makes them feel a bit more okay, normal. There are books to read, and I think since I did that, it's helped my own healing to the point where I'm able to continue being of help to people who can't physically come there. But also, it's put me in a space where I can even more strategically think ahead of the things that I can do for Ghana outside of that nice space. How can I disrupt even more? What's the point of me being alive, right? So, yes, these are some of the things that I've been putting myself into.
Please, your question. Yes. Yes.
So my question is, I find that the work, for example, just talk about Speak More, Let's Divide, right? Wait, I didn't finish. So that podcast, I think it fills in the gaps, right? It serves to do something. There's something missing, and it's there to do something for what is missing. What is it doing, and why did you decide to do it?
Okay, so okay, cool. When it comes to my art, right, I have never done art just because. I always try to right wrongs with everything that I am doing. So you never hear me talk about money that I don't have or cars that I don't really have. I'm always addressing issues. And for a while now, I am really into sound. I'm really into sound. Sound is my thing. So I'm like, how can I tap in with people who I know, who I don't know, to share stories? Because I have so many things to share, but how do I put it out there? Is it through photography? I can only do much. Is it through videos? Is it through my spoken word? it is art and it's not raw coming to the people. I have to use all sorts of things. And I realized that the podcast was so raw, conversation, nothing skillful. So I'm like, 2 years ago, I'm like, I have to start a podcast. Note, about 5-6 years ago, I started a podcast called Department of Sound. But after a couple of episodes, I had to stop because I wasn't well, versed. I was carrying my Zoom recorder, which is still here, and going from house to house to talk to, people. And it became work because I had to use money for transport, and all that. It became work. So I told myself that very soon I would have a proper podcast. So 2 years ago, I started thinking about it, and I'm like, let me start this. Started tapping in with friends. The first person I spoke to was Nana Osei, who passed 2 days before I released the podcast. I've been planning it with him for 2 years. And at the beginning of this year, he fell sick, and I literally saw him die. Sorry. That guy was my G, and I feel I'm doing this for him. He was going to produce the podcast. He gave me so much fame. He gave me so much pressure. And yeah, he. Sorry, guys. Let me cut this.
Yeah. Take your time.
Yeah. So for this podcast, it's just basically to share stories, because I feel we all have our own unique stories. If you listen to the podcast, I've shared so many stories from my side, how I don't believe in, the marriages, how I don't believe in the church, like so many raw conversations. And after the 5th episode, we had investors who were like, wow, we know this is the 5th episode, but we really want to come and invest. And it was a no, because we have also invested. I've invested like 8K USD into this podcast, and I know it will grow and get somewhere. That's when we would welcome investors to bring in the millions. So this podcast is basically to share stories, not just any story, but unique individual stories. And I know I didn't do justice to this question because of the podcast. And
it's all cool. You spoke exactly to what I was asking. My last question before I open up for everyone is this panel, if it's titled Spontaneous Activism. I want to point out two things that one thing each of you have done over the last several years, which is spontaneous, as it is spontaneous, not planned, but it had ripple effects. It affected other people and continued to affect other people. So it was both not planned, but super effective. As much as something that is planned can be ineffective, something that is spontaneous can be super effective. So for you, Golda, when you showed up for the Flagstaff House demonstration, you were passing by to see how things were. You were not even planning to stay long, but then you ended up wearing this sign that I believe Ashesi said to you, take my placard and you could write something. And you wrote, "The king is naked." no one is telling him the truth or something like that. So, and that became a picture that became like one of the processed icons or symbols. Mutombo, I don't have to tell you that your twin brother was at the Global Citizen Festival, and this guy, he was screaming until his voice, he lost his voice, booing the president and clapping and saying, away, away. This has been repeated since then by other people. So can you speak about what was happening at that time, and what do you think about what has happened since you did that?
Okay, so quite recently, okay, so on my social media, if you know me, I'm always booing in a way, booing in quotes. And I've never been scared of it. I've never, even though I've had threats upon threats of, I think that the first panel, they spoke about threats, and Bright and they spoke about threats. I've been getting threats for like the past 10 years or more. Like, the last threats came in right after the Global Citizen concert. And now, whenever I get those threats, I just laugh. This one, well, for like a couple of years, their voice sounds different. And I just laugh. The last one I got, I just started to laugh because I had lost my voice. It was right after, and I'm like, this thing is funny. But yeah, I feel that I am a scapegoat. And I've told my kids, my first child is 7, I've told him, you see, daddy can die anytime. I've told him this. I know he might not understand, but for my family, I have psyched them up. Not just my immediate family, my extended, family that you know what? This is what I want to do. This is what I'm fighting for. This is what I'm getting, all of these threats. But when I die, know that it was for a good cause. And we are starting this just for you. Oh, now say, I think, why are you doing this? The kids, so when you die, I'm like, imagine I die without doing anything. My kids grow up, they die without doing anything. Like, when is change going to happen? And it's so hard coming into close contact with the people at the top. So quite recently, I've been thinking about how to jump outside of my phone to meet these people. So I heard about the concert and I'm like, oh, let me go and chill. I wasn't even going to go, but a good friend of mine forced me that very evening that he had 2 tickets, so we should go. So we went. I had no clue that the president was going to be there. No clue at all. So when they said, okay, now the president of Ghana, whatever, I thought they were going to play a recorded speech. Because if you were there, they were playing, stuff that were recorded, so I thought it was a recording. Right when now, let's welcome the president, I started to boo whilst people were cheering. I started to boo at the back. I was at the back. And everybody was looking at me strange. Then I saw him there, and it got worse. Because finally, this is a concert. I can feel free and have fun. So I started to boo. Those around me were looking at me strange, so strange. But I just went on and on and on and on and on and on. And it got to a time that I could hear the boo spread from right, around me, and I could hear it all the way at the top. To be honest with you, I was scared. But I'm like, oh wow, this is what we actually want. This is what should happen. And after people were, Charlie, but you have to respect the president. Even there was someone there, a lady there, who came to challenge me that something I might now don't, remember. after the concerts, those around me, Charlie, but you, the guy who won a president. And I'm like, that's why we are, you know, suffering. So the boo wasn't planned. I just went to a concert to have fun. But at the back of my mind, no matter where I meet one of those people, I'm going to do anything in my power to tell them how sad or how difficult it is for me now. Not just the boo. On the road, when I'm in my car going from point A to point B, sometimes you hear sirens, you will turn, and there is a motor guy trying to let you move, so some V8 coming past. 37 and East Legon at the tunnel. I've actually parked the first time at 37. I wasn't going to move, so the policeman on the motor used his left leg to hit my car. I stopped there and then, in the middle of the road, and I'm like, why should you do that? Hey, don't you see that? I'm like, I'm not going to move. I'm not going to move. So people like sellers and all, hey, shall we bring down? It took several people to get me to move. And I told the policeman that you are going through what I'm going through, maybe worse. It's your job, do your job, but don't kick my car. It is now hard to come by money. So what if you mess up my car? So in my own small way, I'm doing these things. And I hope that one day everybody would also realize that they have the power to actually cause or to actually disrupt. Yeah.
So for the king is naked, it actually came from a conversation I had with somebody in the president's office at that time, asking them what they were doing right. And I remember the person said, we're willing, but we're not able to because the king cannot see that he's naked. And it struck me, there were so many learned people in that space, but everybody is being an idiot because they just want their paycheck. And I said, but you're also a king who can't see he's naked. You sold out every piece of common sense you've got just for that paycheck. So I think I was so overwhelmed when I got there on that day and I saw people had really rallied. People's emotions were really high, and I felt like, what's the one thing I can say that will just allow me to just vent all this emotion that I'm feeling? And I figured, for my own self, let me put that out. I didn't expect everybody to align with it so well, but it picked up, and it told me that I think just like Mutombo experienced, people feel what you feel, sometimes even more than you do. But for some reason, they don't act out on it until someone triggers it. Then everybody carries it. And that's why it's so important to always speak even when your voice shakes, right? Also like him, since then, I've told my family several times that I can be knocked off any day, and I've made my peace with it. And my children don't live with me. So I had to make my peace with that and also raise them in that brutal honesty that it's something you have to align with. And as they grow, each passing year, they ask more and more questions, like why, all those things. But the most important thing is being able to make your peace with the fact that you could get knocked off, and that's okay, because you would have done your best. My family may have paid a bit of the consequence. Recently, my father and his siblings, even though they were in their 70s, were all brutally heckled by unidentified policemen in the name of taking family land. And I had to show up and make threats that I intended to carry out to the police and the IGP before they backed off. Right now, I've gotten enough pressure on them for investigations to be started, lawsuits to be started, and the IGP refuses to engage me face to face. But on the flip side, I think it also lets me know that my voice, even though it's been almost on my own for so many years, does carry strength. If I can call you out and say shame on you, right? And you can only hide away. It gives me the impression that at least some voice has broken through to your shame. And if I can even encourage other people to speak up when they are brutalized, victimized, treated wrongly, and they can all scream the same thing, maybe we will all find that difference happening that we are not sure can happen, right? So I think every day we just live the fullest and we try and we hope people will be encouraged, because I think we make so many sacrifices. And I hope people are encouraged enough to know that if they do the same, they won't be alone. And the more of us that do it, the less each of us will have to sacrifice.
Thank you so much. So, a round of applause to our two panelists.
Mutombo, my question's for you. Listening to episodes of the podcast, you always kind of have these people on who are kind of revolutionary figures in their own way, but it seems like the beginning, if not almost half of these podcasts, often focus more on very personal issues relating to the person rather than the work themselves. You get to the work eventually, but they always kind of start off with these deeply personal issues that, at least at face value, doesn't really seem to relate to the work until you get to that point later. And I was wondering if that's a conscious decision and what leads you to approach that.
That is a conscious thing that we are doing with the podcast. And like I said earlier, I have so many stories to share. Listening to the stories of other people have changed me in so many ways. I have friends here who have, changed me. One is that guy there, One Love the Kukolo. I'm sure that if my mom was alive now, she would tell me, you don't have to be friends with that guy. He has changed and also inspired me in so many ways. I believe people like him and everyone have stories to share. Even if they don't want to share, we have found ways and means to tap into each one of our guests. An example is Bright Akwe, who is sleeping. An example is Bright Akwe, who is sleeping. And I'm so happy that he's here because he would confirm this. I called him to come to the podcast. I didn't tell him what we were going to talk about, but automatically I think he realized that we were going to talk about his art. He came and 90% of our talk was about death. Because I know that he lost, his dad quite recently. And I think during and even after the podcast, he was like, wow, this was so refreshing and also different. We've had several guests that after the podcast, they go like, wow. And also with each episode that we put out, I still have emails, I still have DMs, I get people reaching out to me, wow, this person's story has really changed me. Every single episode. I was talking to Akosia Hansen again right now. I had so many people told me that, you know what, you have to bring her back. You have to bring her back because we feel that there are so many things that, she has to share. One love, the same thing. Some people DM me. I was like, we could hear sorry, I can say this, but because I stammer, I can't say it. We could hear this comfort in his voice at a point in time. Aside his art, so many people know about One Love's art, but each one of us have stories that, for all you know, they want channels or places to talk about them, or no one has tapped into that side of them. So yeah, it was a very, very conscious effort, and I think it is working well. Yeah, thank you.
Can I just say that one thing about the podcast and the conversations, even where I grew up, people just don't talk about things like religion, spirituality, outside of the box of talking about sexuality and gender. Things that you are told you cannot talk about beyond what is given to you, what you are taught in school, what you are taught in a religious institution. So the conversations that they're having is mind-blowing because you're starting to hear about things that are equally important, but you're not allowed to necessarily have these conversations out loud in public. At least the mainstream media will never have you have these conversations. So I was like, wow, like this is like refreshing.
Can I add something? Where is Kobe Graham?
He's gone.
Okay. So we also have Kobe Graham, on the podcast, and Kobe's episode was one of the most difficult, and that goes to because after the podcast, after he had left, a day after, he calls me and goes like, Mutombo, I want you to do me a favor. Let us take out this. Let us take out that. Let us take out this. Let us take out that. I don't know how or why I said all of those things. He shared really, really deep stuff with us. So yeah, that's the plan. And yeah, we found ways and means to, poke holes into our guest. Right.
Okay, so I just wanted to point, I wasn't sleeping. For both of you, does having family, obviously everyone has something, but does having children or partners who probably depend on you have any, how does that make you feel? People who are very vocal, public, very vocal about things going on and how much you are demanding change or demanding accountability from the powers that be and so on. Does having family and especially having children who depend on you, change how you go about your business? And perhaps if you didn't have that, would that change the kind of strategies that you employ? Because often I assume that having family would be something that can be used to beat you back into check. So that if maybe personally you have ways and means of defending yourself or hiding or avoiding threats and all that, but then your children or your partners become targets for whoever. So how do you navigate things?
Things. Wow. Not the Nigerian name. No. It's my personal silent mode. Right? Now, Bemi has the ability to give you venom. And the situations that you have zero venom. And it's something I passed on to my children, right? It's fascinating that my father has been so broken down by life, but he is the person I got most of my strength from. My father is the most, this man started a family at 27 in an era of coup d'etat, after coup d'etat. Didn't leave town even though he was a medical professional. He could have made a life. Stayed through, had children, ran his own business, failed, started, and every time he would keep telling you, home is the only place you go. And now I think he's more afraid because now they're grandchildren. He's a grandparent, it shifts the whole view. But I raised my children like he raised me. Have no fear, okay? Because who are you afraid of? Another human being? And when I say I'm a feminist, but not the usual type, what I mean is that I can defend myself. It doesn't always have to be physical. It can be mental, psychological. I can think through strategically and know where to even nip it in the bud, right? I know how to navigate serious situations. I can move with the best of them. And if I have to switch and be brutal, I'll do it. And I raise my children to understand these, even though, of course, they are not at an age where they can practice it. But I do this because my father raised me with 7 things in mind. We were 3 girls before the boy came. And I think having gone through all the coup and everything, his situation is, I can't be there for my daughters. How do I prepare them for the world? And he gave us tools that he won't remember, but I did at the time I needed it most. And I feel if I do the same for my children, we can also at least breathe a little easier, knowing that when they need it most, it triggers it, because we can't be there for them all the time. But yeah, I live in a world where I'm ready to switch if I need to, because like I said, baby, I can't be nice all the time, right? And I have to blame myself all the time. So that's my personal approach.
Okay, so for me, if you know me very well and you know my story, most of my friends are still shocked that I might have kids, especially people that I grew up with. I didn't want kids in the first place, but looking back at my family, how things have happened, after my mom, so my mom had 4 other siblings, they are all dead. They all didn't have kids, apart from my mom and one of them. I had an uncle, my mom's brother, who killed himself and his 3 kids in the United States of America. I have another uncle, my mom's younger brother, who killed himself and his wife. They had 2 kids. So looking at my family, after them, if my grandmother just has 3 grandkids, I'm like, if I don't give birth, my family will be wiped out very soon. And because of my lifestyle, because of what I want to do, I think not having kids will be okay for me. But that changed because of my family. Having kids changed so many things. Quite recently, I realized that my first child, who is 7, has never seen daddy on stage before. I told him that in 2023, that is going to change. And like I said earlier, they are still young, but I have started putting it in their heads that your country has to be better for you. And some of us are ready to die for our country. And most of the time when people say to die for, they are just talking to die for. During the Global Citizens Festival, when I realized that Ebufalo was there, I was telling my godfather, Mr. Panjanov, that I wish I was in front. I wish I had a megaphone. You know, some of us are ready to lay down our lives. And like Golda said, I wish there were 10, 20 people like us, who would, join in the fight. I think about my kids. So when I pass, what will happen? But I'm dead. What is left is, I don't care. I'm dead. And they are my kids. Yes, they are my kids. But we are also our own individual, beings. And I came here to fight for myself. My mom died when I was 17. And I've lived from 17 till now with nobody, no uncle, no auntie coming to give me one CD. But I'm still here. When I go, they will still be here. So even though they are my kids, we are still individuals. We came alone and we will die alone. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. It's quite insightful. I really like the presentation. And there's a saying that something must be a man, or something must be a woman. So my question is, what is your motivation? We are all talking about that. What really motivates you to have that kind of pull you to face them without swimming it? What is your motivation? Thank you.
I honestly think the answer is in all the things that I may have said previously. Maybe it's just who we are, how we're born. Sometimes you feel you're trying to swerve a path, but the path keeps bringing you back, right? You're following the path, but it keeps bringing you back to the same direction. And it gets to a point you feel like maybe it's the role you were born to play. I've gotten to the point where I have accepted it as such. So if you ask me what's the motivation, I'd say it's probably deeper. It's who am I?
So, quite recently, I moved to my childhood home. There was a tenant there who, moved last 2 years. So I redid the whole place and I moved there. And being in that space alone, without my kids, just alone, things keep on coming to me. I quite recently have been pouring libation. If you come to my room and I have a bottle of Shinap there, and I'm pouring libation, I don't know to what, or I don't know to who. But anytime I do so, I dream. And so quite recently, I never dreamt of my mom or my grandmother. Because when my mom passed, I don't know if you guys do the same. They gathered all of us in a room, her kids. So me and my 2 other siblings, one passed, and they basically cut a cord between us. She was lying there, and they cut a cord. I have never ever seen her until quite recently, when I started pouring libation. And she speaks to me. Nase, sorry, my name is Nase. Sometimes, how dreams are. Sometimes being so happy. Most of the time, being so happy. And I'm like, I know my mom, if I'm not doing something right, she would beat me. But anytime I dream about her or even my grandma, they are happy. I don't know if it's because I'm still alive, because on my streets, all my friends are dead. All the people that I grew up with, they are all dead. And I come out of my house now and I don't see anyone. I don't know if she's happy that I'm still here, but what comes to me is I'm doing something right. and even before these dreams, deep within me, like I can't tell, but I know that this is me. Don't get me wrong, I can do all the flashy things. I can do all the flashy things. I can move from point A and point B. I can rock chains and all that. But that isn't me. Speaking up brings me joy. So maybe that is the motivation, but I can't pinpoint like, yeah, this is my motivation, that's my motivation. I think it is more inside. And quite recently, with these dreams, I think I'm doing something better, because for my mother there, she would slap me one time. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So a round of applause to our two panelists.